Over this week, you had a meeting, I guess, or hearing with a couple of folks from the Navy, the Navy Secretary, Carlos del Toro, and the Assistant Secretary as well. And you kind of took them to the woodshed. Maybe you could tell us what this was about.
Sure. This is the period when we do oversight hearings with the Navy and all the military services. So the service secretaries, like the Secretary of the Navy, come before the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I really gave it to these guys for doing things that I don't think hardly any Americans, with the exception of the most far left radicals in our country, would want. And that's a whole host of things. First, they're putting forward a military budget that shrinks the Navy, shrinks the Army, shrinks the Marine Corps. I don't know anyone who thinks it's not a dangerous time in our country right now and in the world. And the Biden administration puts forward budgets that shrink almost all the services. We'll have to fix that on the Armed Services Committee like we do every year with him. But Mike, what's amazing is their prioritization. I hit these guys really hard because the Secretary of the Navy is by law supposed to give us a shipbuilding plan, a 30-year shipbuilding plan. Mm-hmm. We just got it the night before the hearing. I had a legislation last year that required a minimum of 31 amphibious warships. Those are the ships that move Marines and, are really our global force response capability with the Marine Corps. That was a really bipartisan bill, by the way. Mm-hmm. And Secretary comes in and says, essentially, I'm not going to support the 31 amphib ship requirement. And we're like, wait a minute.
How can you break the law?
Choice, Mr. Secretary. That's in the law. And it says shall have 31 ships. Like, how the hell do you get around that? And then finally, so they're not doing that. No shipbuilding, no amphibs for Marines to help our national security. But you know what they got out more than a year ago? And you know what the Secretary said was one of his top priorities? You guessed it, climate change.
Climate change, right.
They got the Navy's climate action plan out over a year ago. Shipbuilding, Marines, all the stuff that are required for our national security. No, they're not going to do that. But the climate change plan for the Navy, they got out, and the Secretary said that's one of his top priorities. I mean, this stuff is just insane. And, go to my Facebook page. We pounded the living daylights out of these folks this week, and they deserved it. And by the way, it was even Democrats getting in on the action. It was amazing.
Well, you made a great point, saying the Chinese military isn't worried about climate change. I mean, they're looking at us probably thinking, what are they doing? They're making this easy for us.
Well, I literally said in the hearing, the Chinese military is, focused on building a giant Navy. It's bigger than our Navy now, by the way, and invading Taiwan. Certainly Putin's not worried about climate change. By the way, you remember when Putin first invaded Ukraine? What was the first thing out of John Kerry's mouth? You remember this? It's like, even I say it now and I kind of cringe because it was an American official. He's like, boy, I hope that this is not going to have Vladimir Putin take his eye off his, climate change goals. He said that. It's just, guys like us, we have to laugh, but it's actually really sad and it's really dangerous because when Putin and Xi Jinping are watching the U.S. Navy prioritize climate change over shipbuilding or Marine Corps amphibious ships, they're very pleased. And it's stunning to me, and I think it's stunning to most Americans.
Well, it really is. And just the fact that the Secretary of the Navy thought somehow it was in his purview to just ignore the law. I mean, does this guy understand his job?
Yeah, isn't that remarkable? So right now, because of my amendment last year, the Navy has two platforms that the Congress has told him what has to be the minimum. You have to have 11 carriers. Have to. That's in the law. and 31 amphibious warships. That's in the law. And so I asked them a number of times yesterday or 3 days ago in hearing. So, Mr. Secretary, why are you coming before this committee violating the law? And we finally got your 30-year shipbuilding plan last night, by the way, gave it to us like 12 hours before the hearing. And I said, you don't hit 31 amphib ships for the Marines any time in the next 30 years. Like, with all due respect, sir, what the hell?
Over.
And he said, well, Senator, we're going to study this. We're going to look at options. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. We studied it. We looked at options. You do it. And we told you what they are. Like, the studies and the options are done. You just got to go build the ships. So it was.
Of course.
But on this, Mike, it was really interesting. I had a bunch of Democrat senators come up to me after, believe it or not, saying, couldn't agree more with what you just did. So we'll see. I demanded that this guy get back to the committee very soon with his plan for 31 amphibs. But my goodness, this climate change stuff for the Navy is just insane. They're talking about, we're going to have all electric vehicles for the Marine Corps in 4 years. I'm like, really? Really? How's that going to work? It's just insane. They're not serious people. You need serious people right now on the national security issues facing our country. And whenever these folks talk about climate change as their top priority, the dictators in Beijing and Moscow are smiling.
You know, that's absolutely true. And the other thing I was going to ask you, and I know you have been absolutely a strong advocate for a naval force and military here in the Arctic. Have we gotten anywhere regarding icebreakers and regarding building up a fortress or a force up here? Because we're kind of hanging out there.
Yeah, we have. There's been a really good buildup of the Army, right? We last year redesignated all our Army units, the 11th Airborne Division, and they made the headquarters here, the Alaska headquarters, from an admin headquarters to an operational headquarters at the warfighting headquarters. So that's actually really important, and that's a big deal. And the Army's obviously building up here. So is the Air Force, huge, right? We now, with the F-35s that came to Eielson and the F-22s we have here at Jaber, those are all considered fifth-generation fighters, stealth supersonic fighters. And then we have over 100 fifth-gen fighters now in Alaska, which is more than probably any place on the planet Earth that's got that much fifth-gen fighter power. So that's all good. The Coast Guard is also building up with a big plan. And, yes, we are finally getting icebreakers. This was we're building icebreakers, which is good. It's taken too long to build them. We got 2 icebreakers now. They're both home ported in Seattle. One is broken. And the Russians have 54, many of which are nuclear powered and heavily armed. So the one area where we did make progress, made progress with President Trump, and then the Biden administration kept it going, was, hey, as we're waiting for icebreakers to be built, let's buy some, at least 1 or 2 off the shelf. Believe it or not, there's some commercial icebreakers. Mm-hmm. So it looks like the Coast Guard is in the process of doing that, which is really good. The Trump administration said they're going to do it. Biden administration, to its credit, said we're going to continue that Trump initiative to buy a icebreaker. And long story, but I've really strong-armed the Coast Guard to say, hey, that commercial icebreaker, the one that you're going to get probably sooner than the one we're building, that has to be home ported in Alaska. I mean,
absolutely.
Where else would you put the icebreaker?
An icebreaker, yes.
So right now, the Coast Guard has plans. We're starting to work with them on it. The last year's Coast Guard bill, we got some good movement on this to put that icebreaker. The Coast Guard has decided that icebreaker will likely be home ported in Juneau. Mm-hmm. That was a little bit of a surprise for me. I thought they were looking at other areas of Alaska, but
like where there's ice.
I just said as long as it's in Alaska, you guys figure out where to put it. So yes, that's good progress, but we got to keep pressing it.
The little time we have left, Senator, the Willow Project. I know you guys you really worked hard on that, and it was a great victory. However, there's still a ways to go on this thing.
Yeah, look, it was a minor miracle, right, that we got the Biden administration. And remember, everybody says it was approved by the Biden administration. No, it was actually reapproved.
Right.
The Trump administration approved the Willow Project with an extensive environmental impact statement and 5 drilling pads. And like they've done on everything when the Biden administration came into office, they've literally gone to every good thing the Trump administration did for Alaska, which was a lot. Almost everything we wanted, we got from them. On resource development, on access to our lands, I mean, and the Biden administration has come in and literally reversed every single one of those things. Every single one. It's so frustrating, and it's really goes against the rule of law, right? At what point does America become a banana republic by, like Venezuela, just, switching previous administration decisions? The Ambler Road's an example, the King Cove Road's an example. But on Willow, after gazillions of hours of advocacy, we got them to reapprove the Trump plan. They narrowed it, but still 3 drilling pads. And then what we've done is, we've moved, because we anticipated this, all the radical lower 48 environmental groups, what I like to refer to as the eco-colonialists, they're suing. We knew they would sue to stop this. And I led an amicus brief with our whole congressional delegation, but really importantly, the entire Alaska legislature. Pretty much every member of our legislature down in Juneau signed on to this amicus brief for the court, and we said to the judge, Your Honor, this is in the public interest, and we're elected officials. And she was convinced by that argument, and then the Ninth Circuit, believe it or not, agreed with her. So the radical lower 48 environmental groups' attempts to block the work on Willow, which is proceeding right now. We got a couple hundred folks up there working on it right now, making the gravel pit and the road. It's all proceeding. The lower 48 radical environmental groups have a lot of power and, an army of lawyers. They have so far failed on a preliminary injunction, both at the district court level and the Ninth Circuit level, and that's great news for our state. They're going to keep trying to sue. Those were just preliminary injunctions. So the litigation's not over, but, when all Alaskans are coming together, working together, like people did on Willow, including our legislature down in Juneau, it's tough to beat. So, yeah, things are going good there, but we got a lot more hurdles.